Okay, let's go ahead and start our meeting today. Linda and I had an opportunity to go to Israel in March of this year. And it was a very different type of trip that we took this time than we took 34 years ago. 34 years ago, it was a wonderful trip. We had a Jewish guide and a Jewish bus driver, and they were both armed. And there were certain places we just didn't go to in Israel, because not only would it be dangerous for us, it would be dangerous for them. I wanted a different type of trip, and so we went to Dr. Gary Crossland. And this was a Jesus-only trip, meaning we were going to go to as many places where Jesus was at some point in time, as described in God's Word, as we could. And of the 94 or 97 places specifically mentioned, we did about 70, 75 of them. But many of them are in Palestinian areas. So this time we had a Palestinian Christian and an Arab bus driver. And so I would say about 70% of every place we went was different than places we had been 34 years earlier, which is exactly what I wanted. They were both great trips. One of the things that we did was, on both trips, was go up on the Temple Mount. It wasn't more than 3 weeks after we were there before they began to have some riots and shootings and problems on the Temple Mount. That has really escalated now. Big time escalated. We're going to have Avi Lipkin here the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. And one of the things that we're going to do, we're not going to let Avi make a speech. Okay?
How are you going to do that?
Well, we're going to ask him questions. He doesn't get to make a speech. He only gets to answer questions. Now, I will bet you that some of his answers will be rather lengthy, but that's okay. They're going to be important historical answers. But there's some things that are going on over there now. It changes all the time, and I believe that Israel is, as the nation, is getting ready to experience some pretty significant terrorist activities within their own nation from people within, not just the missiles, the bombs, and the things that come from without, but from within. And it'll be very interesting to have him here. So that's free before we get on with our program. Okay, we want to honor vets today. So if I could have at least 3 of you come up here and sit here next to me. We're going to give each of you an opportunity to come up here and say a few things. And every time one of the vets gets up to speak and goes back to a seat, will another one of you come up here and sit here. So if I could just have 3 of you right now, particularly off of this table, or these 2 tables. Don't everybody trip over yourselves getting up there real quick. But we want to have the vets come up and talk about what branch of service they were in, what time period, if they were involved in a particular action or something to that nature. Talk about that, and then tell us your rank when you exited the military, your branch. And if you've got a few things that you want to say color-wise, we'll be more than happy to have that done. And you know, we did this a couple of years ago. Charles Head was one of our keynote speakers. We actually had Charles and my father, who were World War II veterans, speak, and that was a great time. I didn't know it before then, but David Swafford is a retired captain in the United States Navy. That's equivalent of a full bird colonel, and I didn't realize that. So it was a very informative thing, and I think we got to know each other a little better. So at this point in time, I'm going to ask my County Commissioner, Mike Pearson, to come up here. Mike, you're welcome to come up here and take 2 or 3 minutes. You got to take your hat off so people can see you on camera here. Okay? Mike, go ahead.
Well, thanks for this opportunity. I joined the U.S. Navy in August of 1968. 68? Yes, 68. And was out in 1972. And then was active reserve until 74. I did 2 what they call West Packs and 1 North Pack. The West Pack being Vietnam at that particular time. And I had to wait about 3 months in Da Nang while my ship, which was out, waiting for that. And so I had, some mortars lobbed at us and whatnot when I was at Camp Tenshaw. And then I saw the Da Nang airstrip blown up 2 or 3 times. Of course, they were able to repair those pretty quick. What we did in Vietnam is we shadowed a Russian trawler, fishing trawler that looked like a porcupine with all the antennas on it. And we did have to, at one time there was a failed launch during a mission from one of the flat tops there to what was it, I don't remember what kind of jet planes they were, but they were combat planes that dropped. One of them floated, and the fishing trawler decided it wanted to go for it, and we were a little faster than that, and so when we pulled around, we plugged it full of holes from all of our little handheld weapons, machine guns and whatnot, and made it sink. That was only about $20–30 million worth of U.S. money. But we didn't want them to have it. And then I went up to Alaska, my one and only cruise ship, if you would. And that was just awesome with all the wonderful sea life, the eagles and their eaglets following them. It was just an incredible experience going along the Aleutian Islands. And I was at wonderful Adak Island stationed there and got to spend the wonderful winter there. So that was an opportunity that was just awesome. So in any case, that's where I was and what I did. And yes, I didn't mention a wonderful typhoon that we went through with 125-mile-an-hour winds and 75-foot swells, wherein our little ocean-going tugboat was more like a submarine. In any case, thank you for the opportunity.
Your rank at discharge?
Rank at discharge, I was an E4, which is a third-class petty officer, and yes, I had made second class at one time and kind of gotten a little difficulty with my captain and got busted all the way down and made it back up to Captain Bly, we called him.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it. Okay. Jerome, come on up here, please. Mike, if you'll go back and sit there, and someone else can come and sit in your place so we can do this, and they won't have to stand in line for a long time. Okay, Jerome, tell us about your military experience, and if you'll come on this side of me so I can get back in my chair. Thank you.
My military experience started in 1958. I was in the United States Army, and my job was a Nike Ajax missile assembly and service guy, where we armed, warhead, pressurized, fueled, and oxidized the missile, checked out the guidance system, and turned it on to the launching crew for them to launch to knock out the Ruskies, or the Russians. I was stationed in Kaiserslautern, Germany. I was over there for 37 months. In K-Town, I've traveled all over Denmark, Sweden, Norway, Great Britain, Belgium, France, and everything on furlough. I did this on furlough, bought me a new Volkswagen. But anyway, that was my Army experience. I was in the Army for about 3 years and 7 months, and had a great time in the Army. I got out of the Army, and I had a scholarship to go to Oklahoma State University. I wanted to be an agriculture or a county agent or a shop teacher in high school. So I had won a little $300 scholarship when I was in high school. So I had great ideas to go to OSU. Never happened. When I got out, the timing was just right to be wrong, so I didn't go. But anyway, after that, I got out and came back to the States here. And incidentally, if you've never been seasick on a ship, I went over on the General Marius Rose troop ship from New York City to Bremerhaven, Germany. If you've ever been sick on whiskey, vodka, booze, or anything, and I probably have drank 10,000 tons of that stuff a long time ago, but seasickness is the worst sickness known to man. You will hug the porcelain god, and I'll tell you, there is nothing that is like seasickness. And I've often wondered, when I got on the troop ship with 6,000 guys on the General Marias Row ship coming out of New York City to Bremerhaven, I was in real good physical shape. And lo and behold, after I was on that ship, you carried your duffel bag, your B4 bag, your AWOL bag, and all that type of stuff. Man, I was so sick I couldn't even walk to the galley. And when you go to the galley, it had sideboards on it, and all it takes is for one guy to barf, and that triggers it. It's goodbye chow. And so I had to have guys to bring me crackers, because I felt like I'd been beat with a wet dog. But after that, I got out of the United States Army, went into the Air Force, and if you've heard of AWACS out here, Tinker, well, I was in the forerunner to AWACS, the Super Connie, and I was a radar technician on the EC-121, flying out from Halifax, Nova Scotia to down at Savannah, Georgia. Stations 2, 4, 6, 8 was the numbers, basically. 600 miles out over the Atlantic Ocean, looking for Ivan Kazhenko, the code word for the Ruskies. And if you think that they had the fishing trawlers with 6,000 antenna nets on there, I've got some Babylonian savings bonds I'd love to sell you. But that's another story. Anyway, we never know what they were doing, because in electronics, if you change frequency, there's a thing called automatic frequency control. It'll distract with you. So I spent the time in the United States Air Force, got out of that Air Force and got in the Air Guard, spent 26 years in the Air Guard, and retired as the Chief Master Sergeant, E9. I was in electronics all my career field, basically, and technical stuff. Thanks, Charlie.
Okay, thank you, Jerome. Now I know how the Navy cuts down on chow. They just make sure they get some rough waters and they don't have to fix as much chow. Boston Joe, come on up here. Someone else come up here and sit in these two seats. Boston Joe?
Hi, I'm Joe Shepard, also called Boston Joe by Charlie.
I'm not the only one.
I was in the Air Force for 3 years, 8 months, and 28 days. It was a unique experience. I was 17 when I joined. I turned 17 a month before I went in. I got out just about a month before I turned 21. And I was a radio operator. I was a Morse code interceptor operator. We used to intercept the commies' communications. I was stationed in Turkey for a year and a half. Then when I came back to the States, they didn't need any intercept operators with Morse code, but I knew how to type, so they made me a clerk. And I was out of Westover Air Force Base, which was a SAC base at the time. It's now, I think, an Air National Guard base. And I was assigned to an air refueling wing that used to have aircraft called KC-97, propeller-driven aircraft, and KC-135s, which are basically a 707 with no passengers, just big fuel tanks to refuel the B-52s. And I was a clerk there, and it was an interesting job.
Okay, and what was your rank when you got out?
I was an E3.
Okay.
I never got promoted because I was, I guess you'd call me an unconscientious objector.
Okay, all right. Okay. Charles, you need to get over here. Come on. Steve, come on up here, please. I'd like to see 3 vets over here. Active duty, vets, reservists, I don't care what. Steve Kern, United States Marine Corps.
Thank you, Charlie. Well, in 1964, I graduated from high school. My parents divorced within a month after that, and I went to college and I was flunking out. I knew I was going to get drafted, so I joined the Marine Corps for 4 years in 1965. And so after going through boot camp, when I got to my first duty station, they said, we're going to Vietnam and we need some cooks, and we can't send you to cook training school, but we need volunteers. And so I volunteered. And within about 4 months after that, we were on a ship, troop carrier ship, not from New York to England or to Europe, but from California all the way over to Vietnam. And you talk about sick. I agree with Jerome. That's the worst way to be sick, especially when it's all the way from Long Beach, California to Hawaii. Then you got to get back on the ship and go all the way from there to Okinawa and be a cook in the mess hall. And that was really quite an experience. But anyway, I went to Vietnam, was there for 18 months. And we established the Chu Lai Air Base there. And then we went to Da Nang. While I was in Da Nang, we were on a perimeter there outside of Da Nang, protecting the bridge. We didn't do a very good job because they blew the bridge up. But anyway, while involved in all of that, I made the rank of PFC out of ITR, which was about 6 months after I was in PFC, Private First Class. And within 2 years, I was a E5 sergeant, and running a mess hall there in Vietnam that fed up to 500 Marines. And then when I got out of Vietnam, I spent time at Parris Island, our rifle range, where I ran a mess hall of about 15, where we fed about 1,500 troops at that time. But anyway, my experience in Vietnam kind of came to a close when I had one of the gas burners there in Da Nang mess hall blow up in my face and caught my head on fire. And fortunately, there was a couple of people that thought quickly, and they grabbed a couple of towels and put the fire out. But that put me on the hospital ship Hope for 2 months. And during that time, we went to the Philippines and came back. But that was quite an experience for me because I didn't get a Purple Heart for that. But I was on a ship with a bunch of men who did get Purple Hearts and who deserved it very much. And so, being a Vietnam veteran, I'm so pleased that Vietnam veterans are finally starting to get some recognition and respect for the service. You know, there was about 4,000 of our soldiers and Marines that have died in Iraq. You know, in Vietnam from 1955 to 1975, 58,000 died. 58,325. So anyway, I appreciate the opportunity to tell a little bit of my story.
And your retiring rank?
I was Sergeant E5. I didn't get busted like that other guy.
Okay, all right. Okay. Next up, Don. Charles, get over here. So maybe, come on. Different group, different crowd. They don't remember you.
Hi, my name's Don Lynch. I was in the Air Force. 26 days less than Boston Joe. Anybody good with math? Anyway, I was in for 3 years, 8 months, and 2 days. So he was in for 26 days more. Anyway, I was in the Air Force. They sent me to school for a year. That was in January '68.
Hold it a little closer.
Working on cryptographic equipment. That's the stuff that scrambles messages and descrambles them, stuff like that. Went to Spain for 20 months. Got orders for Vietnam. Had a girlfriend that was working in Spain that was from Scotland. She said, hey, everybody else is going to Sweden. Why don't we just head on up there? And I thought about my uncles. You know, they were in World War II and all that. And I don't think I could do that. So anyway, I went to Vietnam. And I was there for a year. Worked at a whole bunch of various locations. Anyway, if I told you any more about my job, I'd have to shoot you. So anyway, I was a sergeant in the Air Force when I got out in September of '71.
Okay,
That's it. Thank you.
all right. Mr. Mitchener, I want you up here now. Come on, Charles.
Well, whenever I graduated from high school, I grew up out on a farm in Vincent, Oklahoma. The war was about 3.5 years on whenever I graduated, but I was anxious to get out and go fight some Japs. But anyway, when I joined the Marine Corps, well, I didn't even have to. My dad wanted me to stay at home because the farm didn't grant it deferments. But I said, no, I he begged me to stay, but I said, no, I can't do that. Because I think there's only 2 of us left out of all that graduated. Anyway, I joined the Marine Corps, went to Paris Island, so I know a little bit about that. Of course, 6 months later, I was over in the South Pacific in Guadalcanal training for a mission, which, of course, we didn't know at that time what it was, but it turned out to be Okinawa. And, of course, we, on Easter Sunday, we hit the beaches in Okinawa. And, of course, that was the very last stronghold that the Japanese had outside their homeland, the very last place that we had to hit before we could attack Japan. I spent 6 weeks on the island before they blew me up, and I wound up in the hospital for a couple of months. After the war was over, we were boarding a ship in Honolulu for the invasion of Japan. Of course, again, they don't tell you anything until you're about 2 days out to sea. But he thought, oh boy, that's great. But they dropped the atomic bomb, and that ended that. But anyway, we went on to Japan. I did 10 months occupation duty in Japan, and our job was to blow up ammunitions, bombs, and everything that they had in stock, and it was tremendous. They were actually buried like underground moles, the whole island of Japan. And they even had trains that run through their tunnels and huge doors. But I didn't like that business of lifting up those bombs and taking them out and blowing them up. So they asked the volunteers one day for a butcher. And I said, oh yeah, I've done that. We kill chickens and hogs. But Steve, the kind of food that we fed the Marines was not even worth eating much of the time. One of my first experiences as a cook was breaking eggs. And we would be breaking one egg and put it in a cup and then dump it in there. And the old sergeant came by. And he came by and he said, no. Let me show you how to break eggs. You take 2 eggs at a time. In they go. You don't separate them, but of course, in went chickens. Oh, what am I going to do with that? He just dipped it out, threw it aside, cracking eggs. Then we go rotten eggs, and they went. So, Marines had a lovely time of food in their chow line. So, I tell you, when I got a chance to stay aboard ship, I wanted to stay there, because they ate like sailors. And it was good. Okinawa was a pretty rough battle. They said it was going to be the worst island of the whole Pacific area. And of course, we were expecting the worst. We walked ashore. Not a shot was fired. And our objective the second day was to take the airfield. We got there by 11 o'clock. But then that was when it all ended. We went north. The island was such rough terrain on the north end of the island that everything had to be carried up in the mountains by foot. No vehicles could go. And the caves were loaded solid. The north end wasn't. We had secured that. And then, of course, moved on to the south. I got hit by a mortar I was been on the island 6 weeks, so that ended my battle career as such. The island, the 6th Marine Division, almost every man was either killed or was wounded in that battle. So it was a pretty rough battle. But I could tell you a lot of stories, but I mean, I don't like to talk about it anyway, but the Lord did a good thing for me. Most of my experience was so terrific, He wiped it out of my mind, if you can believe that. But of course, I remember a lot of other things that was doing that. But I gained the rank of corporal when they retired me after 30 months. The war was over.
What age are you, Charles? What is your age?
I'll be 90 on December the 27th.
That's not far off.
I should say I'm different than all the other distinguished men who came up here in that I was always just a reservist. All right, in the Army Reserves, the artillery. And I was stationed out of Ogden, Ogden, Utah. I got to get my states right. Ogden, Utah. And now our unit, our battery, and our battalion that were in the artillery battalion, I want you to know we did travel places, like these gentlemen speak of, going to these distant lands. We went all the way to Nevada. We shot out car shells in Wyoming. I'm telling you, they're there. And even right here at Fort Sill, my first experience with Oklahoma was when I came to Fort Sill, all right? And down there doing the training, and a whole bit, matter of fact, there's that farmer. Every time I go down there, I apologize to him for taking down his barn. I didn't think it was that far off, but yeah, only kidding. But there were those shells that did leave the post. It was not a good thing. You know, I will tell you though, had some great experiences, even as a reservist, going out there. I know they're not nearly the same caliber as those who are on active duty in harm's way. All right, really respect that. But there are friendships that bond rather closely, even in something like the reserves after years. I started out as an E3 when I first joined, and my sergeant on the gun that I was on, okay, the howitzer I was assigned to, the sergeant in charge, E6, okay, Russ Boker, real gentleman. Years later, as we both went along in our rank advancement, I'd got my commission, and eventually became the battery commander. At that point. And he himself, Russ Boker, had advanced to the rank of E9, first sergeant, and he was my first sergeant. And we've been friends for years, and it means a great deal to me. I can imagine if our unit was ever activated, I couldn't think of a person I'd rather serve with than Russ Boker. He just meant that much to me. On the other hand, I will say, I served during the Cold War age, when the reserves weren't activated very much. We weren't needed, so hence I had the privilege of going home most nights, right, to my own bed, and to enjoy the company of my own family. It was, I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful for the friendships I did make during that time.
Okay. Thank you, Bob. Commissioner? I don't know about the rest of you, if you're veterans or not, but if you are, please come up to the table. So, Mr. Mitchell.
I do have a first name, it's Robert. He always calls me Mr. In other circles where I've been, not many people know me, but they know John Michener's mother, Polly Pat, and so I always introduced myself as Mr. Polly Pat. They knew immediately who I was then, so in this circle, I'm John's dad, okay? I was going to be drafted right out of college at Oklahoma Christian, so I ran down to Oklahoma City and signed up in '69 for a year or two, and ended up staying 21 years as an Army fixed-wing airplane pilot. Served in those 21 years in Vietnam, Saudi Arabia twice, concurrently in South Korea and Japan. What I did in Vietnam is still classified, other than saying I was a spy in the sky. That's about all I can say there. Saudi Arabia, when I went there, took John when he was 6 months old. Never wore shoes the entire 2.5 years we were there. Didn't need them. What were we doing in Saudi Arabia? Nobody else in the world knew where it was except people bringing in their oil. We were trying to work with the Corps of Engineers and building their infrastructure for Air Force bases, water wells, fencing every sand dune in the world over there. They were just beginning, spending billions and billions of dollars, and our Corps of Engineers in the Army managed all of that. And I remember one little story where it was time to go get them to pay for a phase of construction that we had managed. It was going to be several $1 million, and our chief engineer, full-bird colonel, in 06 in the Army, I was piloting him. We went over to Jeddah, and he says, Robert, we don't know how they're going to pay us. Please don't laugh. He says, I've had gold bars, I've had silver, I've had jewelry, I've had US dollars, I've had Saudi riyals, and it all comes in paper bags usually. So we went over and picked up several brown bags of different kinds of currency to pick up several $1 million, and that's before they learned how to put certificates of deposit with Chase Manhattan back in the early 70s, okay? So they've come before they own Chase, Charlie. That's absolutely right. Yeah, well, they do own a lot of where we are today. So it was a great experience, 21 years active duty with the U.S. Army. But I will just append that by saying that I immediately went to work civil service for the U.S. Army for another 25 years. And I spent more time in the field as a civil servant, putting on the uniform of the active duty soldier and going to places like Mogadishu, Somalia, and Kuwait, and Guantanamo Bay. And it was, I'm getting goosebumps, it was a real honor to be able to work with those young soldiers where I had been and to teach them how to manage risk in their lives. And this was a whole different generation of soldier than came in with me, because they all volunteered to do that. And highly respected by me. And I really felt that, well, it was an honor to serve with them for 25 years, to teach them and to mentor them and to live with them wherever they went in the world. And we have a great Army today. And Bob, you were talking about the reserves, you know, they're going to be 50% of our force today in anything that we do. And they're fully prepared in the reserves now to do anything the active Army can do. So you can feel proud of what we have in uniform, ready to serve you and me today. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you. Mr. Depew, come up here, please. Or we'll call you Robert, even. Or Bob.
I've been called a lot worse than that.
Would you rather sit down, or are you okay to stand up?
Oh, I'm okay to stand up. Yeah. Age hasn't quite got me that bad yet. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
I had such an important thing to do in the service that I don't want anybody to miss out on it. I was 17 years old, and when the North Koreans decided
Bob,
to go...
point it toward you. Point it toward
Okay.
you. Thank you.
I was 17 years old when the North Koreans decided to go south. And so I rushed right down and tried to get in the Air Force, and they wouldn't take me. I was a little too dumb for the Air Force, but I wanted to fly because I had a little bit of experience in private Keith Kale aviation. So nobody would take me but the Navy. The Marines would, but I didn't want anything to do with the Marines. Too tough, too rough for me. So anyway, first thing they did, I survived boot camp somehow. I only had to go to the hospital one time for a couple of months. But after I got out of that at San Diego, they sent me to Kwajalein Island down in the Marshalls. We had a little chore down there, and that was to test the world's first hydrogen bomb. And I had nothing to do with it except fill a billet at 17, work the hobby shop and the radio station. Well, when I left that, they sent me to Korea. And that turned out to be a big joke. First thing that I got out of that part of the world was that I got 3 ribbons. I got the China service. That was for protecting Mao from Chiang. And we run up and down the coast of China, making for sure that the Chiang didn't get to invade the homeland. Well, after that was over, went up north. They've got a railroad that runs up the east coast of Korea, and we would row of mountains between the railroad and and the ocean. So we would lob shells over. Well, they had a little job back then called, they'd send a group of men ashore to call in the fire. And since I wasn't all that popular with the executive officer, I usually got in on that as the barman. I was glad when that was over, and out of that I got the Japanese occupation ribbon. And I'm kind of proud of that one. I didn't even know we was occupying Japan, but we was occupying them. And so I got the China service, Japanese occupation, and Korean combat. Actually, I spent almost 4 years. Out of that 4 years, most of it was, all of it was fighting the Navy. And I didn't know when I went down for my discharge whether I was going to get an honorable discharge or a general discharge or bad conduct or what, but they gave me, I was surprised, they gave me an honorable discharge and asked me to re-up, and I said, you have to be kidding. That was sort of my service with the Navy for what it was worth. I don't know if any of you know Colonel Edwards or not. Colonel Edwards kept trying to get me to go to Vietnam. And I told the colonel, I said, I'm too old to go to Vietnam. They won't take me in Vietnam. He said, oh, I think they would. Well, I said, I didn't even turn in my paperwork down at the courthouse. And he said, well, and I said, besides that, they burned down the record building up in Missouri, so you can't get my records and I can't get them. He said, oh yeah, I can get them. And so he got my records and brought them to me, and he says, well, you got these 3 ribbons here, but he says, they won't take you. We should have started on this 2 or 3 months ago, so I was too old to go to Vietnam. And he did real good. He's 90-something. He was a colonel then. He's a general now and discharged, but he still lives in Oklahoma City. I run into him and his 90-some-odd-year-old girlfriend over at McDonald's all the time. So anyway, that's my military service. I fought hard against the Navy. And, that's it, Charlie. Thank you for giving me
Thank you, Bob. We did used to have a gentleman when we were meeting at the Golden Corral in Edmond. We had a gentleman that would come to our meetings, very hard of hearing, would sit right up at the front table. I don't remember his name. After he got out of his military service, he actually went in the oil business and had an oil company. But he was around 91 or 2 at that time, because I remember we did a birthday cake for him. He actually served in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. And after he had been in Vietnam for a while, and they found out he had re-upped, they said, you're too old to be here. And he said, well, I'm here anyway. And he was a CB or something, I don't remember, maybe Army Corps of Engineers. I think he was a heavy equipment operator, but he had actually served in 3 wars, and that was a really remarkable thing. And then sometimes it happens, just didn't see him anymore. Don't know what happened to him. And but at that age, you just never know for sure. Now, if there's any of the rest of you that I'm not aware of that were in the military, please come up here right away. Otherwise, we're going to shut our meeting down. Okay, folks, thank you so much for coming. And I wanted to do this for the veterans. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much, all of you that served in the military, for your obedience and their service there. Thank you so much.